Again, I use my trusty cordless impact wrench, and I have a long extension attached to a swivel down to an 8mm socket, and you're able to get all 6 bolts out real easy. And then to remove it from the carrier, you have to use a punch and just give it some little light taps and place the punch. You're looking at this guy, is the punches have to come against the back, and there's all these spots around that you can just give it some nudges. Comes out real easy. So that guy's out there, and then we'll do the back, and then we'll take the carrier off. Removing the front first worked real well. You can just rotate the back and take it right out. Make sure you support it well with your knee as you're loosening up the carrier so it doesn't smash you in the face. Next up is this frame brace, which again is the same bolt size as the others that we've been taking out, 15mm, so you can just take your impact wrench and go right to that. And then after that, we've got to take out this catalytic converter, which I suspect is going to be a little more tricky. Not the least of which is because exhaust bolts are frequently stubborn enough to break, so hopefully we won't break any of those. So I'll pop that off, and then I'll start working on the catalytic converter. The frame brace is gone. That was very easy to take off. And next up is the catalytic converter. To take out the catalytic converter, you also need to take out what they call the flex pipe, or the Y pipe. That means disconnecting it from the rear tailpipe assembly, and also disconnecting it from the catalytic converters, and then also disconnecting the oxygen sensor wires. The oxygen sensor wires come out real easy. I haven't tried to do the catalytic converter bolts yet. The front ones look very clean. The rear ones look a little rusted. I'm going to spray those with some Aerocroil and maybe some freeze off. But I just figured I'd show one thing. This side may have some problems if it's old and rusted. I've already had to replace my muffler on this car, and I used a replacement from Walker that was $100 versus spending $700 or $800 or $900 for the Buick tailpipe assembly. And so I've already drilled those out, so those should come out pretty easy for me because I've replaced those with bolts that have been coated in anti-seize. Okay, so the Y pipe is now out, and that actually went pretty smoothly. But now I have to get the catalytic converter out. There are 3 bolts on the catalytic converter that hold it to the exhaust manifold. 2 of them face, well, the head is facing to the front of the car, and one of them, the head is facing to the rear of the car. I was able to get the top one out, and the one on the driver's side out, but the one on the passenger side was very difficult to get access to and put a wrench on and try to turn a wrench. So what I'm doing is I'm jumping ahead a step where we're supposed to remove the heat shields. So I've already removed a heat shield that was screwed in here. It was a heat shield that covered this area. There's 3 10mm bolts, take out real easy. And then I removed a heat shield that was here. Again, 3 10mm bolts. And then there's a heat shield on the top. Oops, sorry. Strap is caught here. There's a heat shield. Let's see if I can show it. Right there. The harness for the O2 sensor is plugged in there. And it appears that there's just 2 10mm bolts holding that one. So we're going to take that one out. And between those 3 heat shields, I think I'll have better access to that bolt. So come back in a second and see how that all looks. Alright, so now that heat shield is out, that all those heat shields are out, much better access to this bolt. In fact, I think I should have done that the first time because it would have had better access to the other lower bolt as well. So that last one is the one that has to come out. On one of them so far, the nut came off all by itself, and on one it took the stud with it.
but nothing broke. So we'll take that one off, pop the catalytic converter out, and then move on to the next step. The next step, according to the GM service manual, is to start to lower the front frame. Basically, what they have you do is remove the reinforcement bolts for the rear part of the frame, and then loosen all of the mounting bolts and the reinforcement bolts for the front of the frame, and then remove the mounting bolt on the rear and let the rear drop down a bit. Now, it sounds like the frame has to get lowered to create enough room to move the rack out. But then after you do that, you go on to actually disconnect the hoses and then disconnect the steering rack mounting bolts themselves. I'd rather do that while the frame is mounted secure. So I'm going to try moving the steps around and see if that helps me a little. Then I only lower the frame as much as I need to get the rack out. So I'm going to first try to take off the mounting bolts, then the hoses, catch all the fluid, and then we'll lower the frame, get the rack out. As you can see, I have relocated the jacks holding the car up. They're now back at the frame rails, just behind the front wheels now, as opposed to where they were before, which is the front of the car. That's so that I'll be able to lower the frame when we get to that step. So if we go under, what I'm going to do first, let's see if I need some light here. Those two lines right there are the lines to take off of the power steering rack. So we'll take off those, disconnect those, and drain all the fluid. And then we'll also remove the mounting bolts, those two guys there, and there's two more in there that we get from the other side. That should disconnect it from the frame. And unless I'm missing anything, then we'll just lower the frame and make enough room to get this out. They say it comes out of the driver's side. I'm not quite sure what they mean by that yet, so we'll see how it all works. I have disconnected the fluid connections. We're looking through the passenger side wheel well here. It's not focusing. There we go. So the next part is we're going to disconnect that connector and then try to start lowering the frame to make enough room to get this out. Just as a note about the bolts that hold the rack to the rail, to the frame rather, I did remove those already. The ones on the passenger side are 18 millimeters. Those came out very easily. The ones on the driver's side are 24 millimeters. And well, I had a 24 millimeter impact wrench for the side that I could access with the impact wrench. I did not have a 24 millimeter box wrench, so I used a 15/16, and that worked just fine. So now let's see if we can pull off that. This looks like it's like a fuel injector kind of connection. This clip comes out, and then this guy just comes off. Alright, so now this should actually be loose, and it's just a matter of getting it out and trying to make enough clearance. So we'll... Okay, I'm back, and the rack is just about to come out. So what I've done, after I got all the bolts off of the rack and disconnected all the hoses and the wires, I went and I loosened all three of the front frame bolts. So you have the reinforcement bolts, and then you have the mounting bolt itself. I just loosened those, kept them engaged. I put my jack underneath the transfer case to support it. And then you take out all of the bolts out of the back of the mounting frame, the rear two and the mounting, the reinforcement bolts and the mounting bolts. You remove all those. The mounting bolt actually stays in place because of how it's attached to the isolator bushing. And then I use the jack to slowly lower the frame, and you have to lower it until this steering shaft input can clear can clear the lower part of the wheel well opening. And then you just kind of do some muscling around. If you peek in there in the back, you can see that's the passenger side mounting bracket. That actually will swivel around the steering rack. So I moved that around and I swiveled it up so that it wasn't crashing into the frame anymore. And I just kind of did some wrestling, and eventually you get this, as I said, that shaft to clear the opening, and should be, I don't know if I can do this while I film, but should be home free now. My outer tie rod ball joint on the other side is hitting. So I'll put the camera down and fix all that and yank it out. And she's out. So there it is. That's the old steering rack, 108,000 miles on it. Considering the history of these things, I guess that's not terrible. I think it's very possible that the only thing that really failed is that little actuator at the end there. But nonetheless, all new, brand new model going in, and the outer tie rod ends should be showing up today. And these are the parts that we basically pulled out. You've got prop shaft, some brackets, some frames, some exhaust parts, not a lot. And then this is what it looks like when it's all lowered. That's about how much gap I needed to get it out, if that helps. Of course, for me, I'm also going to be changing the power steering pump, so I'll cover that in a different video. And I might very well be digging into the timing chains as well, which would be a first, I think, for a homeowner without a lift. So we'll see how that goes. Thanks again. Bye.